um, we're going to make some documentation. So the first thing to do is to get SimpleDocs installed off the Packlet server. Then you'll go to the palettes, go to the SimpleDocs palette, open that up. We'll see there's not much going on here. And we'll make a new project. You give a name to your project. Maybe I'll make some tutorials, so I'll call it like tutorials. You can supply a directory, like if you want this to live on the desktop, you can pass the desktop as your directory. And if you have a config file, you can supply the config file or the relative path to the config file off of this base directory. But both of these are optional, and SimpleDocs will make them for you. So for now, we'll just give it a name and press OK. Now we have a project. We can see where it lives. It lives in the user base directory under the applications data. But this project has a folder, a subdirectory called project. It has some the directory in that called docs. And this is where our documentation will actually build out, or where our project files will be stored. Okay. So let's see. There's a lot here, but for now we'll just see. It's we're making, or it's a project called tutorials. So, let's make it simple. So make a symbol. It'll take a bit to load as it loads some stuff. But we get this template notebook here, this notebook that we fill out and supply all our data for. The first thing that we'll do before any of these other things is we'll just save this to our project. Okay, it's saved. Maybe I should have given a better name first, but it's saved in your project. Actually, let's look at what would happen if we wanted it to save with a different name. So to do that, we'd first edit our metadata. There's a lot of metadata here, but let's just clear it for now. We only need to fill out 2 fields. So let's first say that we're in the tutorials context, because maybe we'll, I don't know, have some functions in this packlet, not sure. And we'll supply a label. Rather than sim, let's call it tutorial sim. So it's just a symbol for our tutorials. Once you've filled out those 2, you can just hit populate, and it'll populate the rest of the fields intelligently based off that. It's not a sample packlet symbol, it's a tutorials symbol now. Okay. And then let's just copy. Now we can just save to project. And now it saves as tutorial sim.md. Okay, cool. Let's take this name here, this tutorial sim. One thing worth noting is that these all have to be enclosed in a string characters, because some of these are lists and some of these are booleans. So be careful with that. Okay, but let's just replace all these sims with tutorial sim. Tutorial sim. Let's give it a usage message. It's pretty useless. There are some auto-populated details that you can use. But for now, let's just write something. Let's make a code the chunk of code, so let's have it show up in our final stuff in a code-like form. That was just making it inline cell with, you know, Control 9 or Alt 9 or whatever it is. Let's make something italic. Absolutely useless. Okay. Cool. We gave it some details. Does nothing. Just give it some, you know, example text. Give an example with input, sample, output. All of my symbol pages, I like them to have this just the print definitions of the symbol. But see, that should be tutorial sim. And then there are these see also links, these related guide links, these whatever links. I mean, this is just a plain notebook, so whatever you put in here, well, whatever you put in here from about here down is what you're going to see in the final notebook. One sort of annoying thing about, well, about the way Mathematica handles things like hyperlinks here is if you continue to type just regularly in this line, Mathematica will continue to think of this as a hyperlink. So to get more of these see also links, you really need to go to the lower level box structure and just sort of copy things. You can just copy and paste and copy and paste. And if you want to edit where these links, you know, point to, the easiest thing to do is just to edit like directly here. So let's say that this symbol is actually in the tutorials package. This is in the, I don't know, the no tutorials package, you know, something like that. And these are global symbols, I guess, or system symbols. Cool. These guides, similar kind of thing, just provide a hyperlink. Do what you want there. These links here, exactly the same as the guides. And then this footer here, you can change it to whatever you want. I mean, it's just a notebook. You can do what you want with it. Okay, but now that we have a symbol or a notebook to work with, we have our documentation saved. We can go to this little hamburger menu up here and say, for example, save to documentation. It'll complain about not finding style sheets. That's just a bug in the Mathematica export process. This will not appear when the end user opens this notebook. But in the export, it loses the link to some of the style sheets and complaints. You can see that this is open because, you know, I left it open here. If I close this, this would end up closed. But this looks generally correct. And this is what it will look like. This is the final sort of documentation notebook product. Cool. Okay. We can also save this to Markdown, which is a sort of intermediate format that can be used to generate web pages and stuff. And it's pretty standard Markdown as far as Markdown goes. It just has this sort of metadata block to begin with that my website builder or things like Pelican will use to set various data that, yeah. Okay. That's pretty much it for making a symbol page. You know, obviously making a real one is harder because writing documentation is hard, but as far as the process goes, that's pretty simple. In terms of the Markdown that you're using, you can supply any other options you want right here. You know, you can now this ASDAC option will get cooked into the markdown. Let's see. And if we want the markdown or the documentation notebook to save automatically, we can just check these things, and when we I'll just check that. When we save it, the markdown gets saved automatically. And if I open this and look at the markdown, now we see that this ASD option or setting also got passed in as metadata. You can also change up some of the export or change up stuff in the export process. For example, by turning on this use image input setting, which we can look at it. What it does is it takes that which would have been plain text, and now that what would have been plain text is a is an image now that will have a pop-up to copy the content when it gets built. This is just doing what the Mathematica online documentation does. Personally, I prefer plain text, so I'll turn it off, but it's there if you want it. Okay. Let's see. That was making a symbol page. If we sort of just reload this, we notice that it's in our project now, and we can just access it directly from this menu. So that's convenient. I don't think I made any changes. It's probably just some dynamic linking stuff. Let's just say don't save. You can also make a tutorial. Again, just type whatever you want. One thing worth pointing out is that let's compare this to the advanced dynamic tutorial. So SimpleDocs does not provide access to any of it doesn't allow you to use this sort of jump link box thing, or it doesn't provide it naturally. You can still do this, but you just have to sort of put it in yourself. And this kind of special emphasis or text emphasis note thing is not in there by default. And the reason for that is I wanted to keep the documentation simple. It should be simple to make this stuff, and you shouldn't have to go through the link making process or anything like that. And also, this way, when you export to Markdown, when you export to what will be the final HTML page, you're not or things like this wouldn't really appear well there, and it would be a huge pain to implement something like that in pure Markdown. So I'm leaving that, at least for now. I guess we don't really need to build out this tutorial. Just an illustrative example. Now, if we look at what we have here, so we have this tutorials thing. We now have, one documentation page. This is what people will be able to work with. And we have this whole structure thing here. Now the question is what do we do with this? Well, the big thing you want to do with this, either you can either have this build to a different directory altogether. So you could always have specified a different directory or relative path or whatever you want from this root that this documentation would have built to. Or you can copy this thing move it to your other project, something like that. Or you can take this thing here, this project, and turn it into a Packlet, and then other people can install the documentation from this Packlet. And to make that easier, I've included this, well, it says update Packlet info, but it'll also make your Packlet info. But you see it made this Packlet extensions documentation language. That's kind of funny. Because we had no guides, it tried to figure out, what is the best main page to find. And actually what we really want is we don't want English/SimpleDocs styles. We actually really want, say, our only symbols, so reference pages / symbols / what was the name? Tutorial sim. This is just a standard Packlet info file. You just edit it as you would any other Packlet info file. You can do sort of a funky thing too, where if you wanted this this documentation to be for like a different package altogether, I could even say something like btools, like the link base is btools. And now, if I search btools /ref /tutorial sim, it would give me this page. But that's sort of higher level usage that we can talk about later. Okay. For now, we have our Packlet info file. If we update it, you see that it tries to update that thing back to its best guess for what the main page is. So that's one thing that you'll need to be aware of. On the other hand, let's just make this simpler. Let's just give it a guide to work with. Just any guide. Okay. By default, this main page tries to find a guide to work with, like a guide to use. And so if you have a guide in your project, it'll automatically pick the first guide or the guide that is closest to the name of your Packlet as its best guess for the main page. Okay. Which is just what you'll find if you just Control F tutorials, and it'll give you this thing. Okay, so what do we do with that? Well, now that we have this thing can now be bundled as a Packlet. It'll keep this documentation, this Packlet info, this tutorials thing. So we can just bundle the Packlet. It gets copied in. We prune off that little project directory because that can't be accessed. Now we have this Packlet here, which we can give to someone else, and they can work with. They can just install. Then they have your documentation. That's what makes this useful. Okay. Now, what else can we do with this? Well, with this this setup that we have here, this project docs content thing here, this can also be used to build a website for documentation from this markdown. And you can sort of configure the website. There are lots of options here, which it's not worth going into what they all do right now, but at some point it's worth talking about. But we can just hit this build site button. It does a lot of copying, and then it builds a website, generates some index files, generates a bunch of other stuff for us. We have a website that is built, and now if you open this index file on the web, so let's see how it looks if we just open this thing in Chrome. But see, we have this thing. It's a web page. You can open up this functions thing. It's not going to be perfect because we're not running an actual web server, but you can do that just using the SimpleDocs context. So actually, let's show that for just a moment. File opening. So let's just see what that looks like. So SimpleDocs, load SimpleDocs, and now we have the tutorials project. So let's see SimpleDocs at what did I call this function? Reload open context. View local site. That's what I call it. Let's see how this works. Okay, so it just started a web server here. We can see our function has a page. This works out nicely. These things try to link as relative links. There's an option that you can set to change how the links generally work, but relative links are by and large the thing that will be most useful to work with. These are just links, you know, and these are just links. These are also relative links. You know, you have an about page, you have a documentation thing. There's an index of all the functions. You know, the functions, if you have a bunch of them, will be listed out. The guides, if you have any or a bunch of them, they'll just be listed out. The tutorials will be listed out. And it's just an easy sort of way for people to look at your documentation on the web. Okay. All right, I wouldn't know about that. Beyond that, I think we've covered the basics of what you know, you can do with SimpleDocs, and how this palette works. And if you have questions or you want some new features or anything like that, raise some issues on the SimpleDocs GitHub page. So actually, if we go to SimpleDocs here, it should be on here, and if it's not, it will get on here. But if we go here, you can look at the URL. You can follow this URL to the GitHub repo. And if you want to know things, you can just raise an issue. You can see some of these have already been raised. And I'll answer those as best I can. Cool. But beyond that, nothing else really to say, so I think we're done here.